Similar to promises about uploading videos on a consistent schedule, here at Casually Competitive we like to break Magic formats. So with Oathbreaker being the newest, more or less official Magic the Gathering format, we decided to give it a shot. And honestly, it went a lot better than we expected. So for those of you who don't know, Oathbreaker is a format that's been around for quite a while, but just recently became an official format. And it's a format that's very similar to Commander, but has some major differences, which actually makes the games quite a bit different. So before we get started, let me quickly explain the rules of Oathbreaker if you haven't heard yet. First off, similar to Commander, it is a singleton format, but instead of 100 cards, it's just 60. It is an eternal format, but the ban list is slightly different, banning most of the fast mana rocks, which honestly, side note, I really like about this format. The next major difference is, well, you have kind of a commander, but instead of just any legendary creature, it's any planeswalker in the game, as well as this guy, but that's a weird edge case rule that we're gonna ignore for now. And in addition to this commander or Oathbreaker, you also have a signature spell. This also sits in its own zone and follows the same rules with commander attacks, and you can only cast it when your Oathbreaker is on the battlefield. This card can be any instant or sorcery spell, so I think you can see how this format can get out of hand very quickly. And well, that's what we set off to do. We wanted to come up with some decks that are maybe not the most overpowered decks, because I think this format is going to be very, very fast if played competitively. We wanted to make decks that were interesting but still high powered. So all the guys came together and put together some decks that they thought would be fun. We didn't really plan it out, so this first pod has no blue at all. So you don't get to see what control's like in this format, which some of you probably like. Now, if you are interested in seeing some more control-y decks, we do have a second pod that we were planning on just playing for fun. And if you guys are interested, we'd love to record it and make a video for you guys. So let us know your thoughts in the comments below, but that's for later. Today, we have two games of the same pod, which both took drastically different directions, and I think you guys will love both of them. But without any further ado, let's get into the deck introductions for our first ever Oathbreaker game. Jordan went first, playing a very ramp-heavy deck led by Nissa, who shakes the world, and he used Finale of Devastation as his signature spell. The plan for this deck is fairly straightforward: make big mana, get a lot of creatures, and then just swing out. The main combo in this deck involves Ashaya, Soul of the Wild, and Quirion Ranger to generate infinite mana, and then use his signature spell to pump up his board and win the game. Going next was Nate, playing a very well-known planeswalker and signature spell, Wren and Six, paired with Crop Rotation, but the line he's going for is, well, much like the videos on this YouTube channel, it's not something you see every day. His plan is to use Crop Rotation to tutor up a Dark Depths, and then use it again to tutor up a Thespian Sage, which he will use to get a 2020 indestructible flyer, and, well, since life totals are 20, it's kind of a one-shot. Adam went third and had a similar game plan to Jordan's: ramp fast and play big creature, but he decided to use Tyvar Jubilant Brawler and Glimpse of Nature in his Oathbreaker zone, I guess. The reason for this is Tyvar allows him to get faster value from his mana dorks, and Glimpse of Nature is a cheap and repeatable spell that can generate him a massive amount of card advantage. And finally, going last is Bill, playing Godo Bandit Warlord disguised as Lukka Coppercoat Outcast. All of the creatures in this deck are either 1 CMC creatures or Godo himself, and the goal is to play these 1-drop creatures, cast Lukka, and then use the -2 ability to turn one of those 1-drops into Godo. You can then use his signature spell Magnetic Theft to equip the helm to Godo, and well, then he just does Godo things. So now that you know what's going on, let's start the game with Jordan playing a forest and tapping it to cast a Llanowar Elves. Nate plays a Wooded Foothills and then cracks it to shock in a Stomping Grounds, going down to 17 life. He uses that to cast an Elvish Mystic, and he then ships the turn over to Adam. Adam starts his turn off by casting a Once Upon a Time for free, and off of the cards he reveals a Nykthos Shrine to Nyx. He then plays a forest as his land and taps it for an Arbor Elf. With nothing left, he passes to Bill. Bill plays a Snow-Covered Mountain and taps it for a Skirk Prospector, quickly passing the turn back to Jordan. Jordan starts his turn off by tapping his Mana Dork to cast a Wild Growth, enchanting his land. He then taps this land for 2 mana, and he uses that to cast an Allosaurus Shepherd, and then follows that up by a Draga Tree Speaker. He then finishes his turn by playing a Nykthos Shrine to Nyx as his land, and he then passes to Nate. Nate starts his turn by playing a forest, and then taps his 2 lands to cast his Oathbreaker, Wren and Six. He then follows the golden rule of, if you can screw over Adam, you kinda gotta do it, by using his -1 ability on his commander to ping down Adam's Arbor Elf. With nothing left, he passes the turn to Adam. Adam untaps and then adds a Nykthos Shrine to Nyx to his unfortunate board state. He then casts a Birchlord Ranger and then passes the turn off to Bill. Bill plays a Crystal Vein as his land for turn, and he then cracks it to help cast a Jezka's Will, targeting Nate. This resolves and he gets 6 red mana to his mana pool, which he uses to cast his commander Lukka. Lukka resolves, and then he activates the -2 ability on Lukka, sacrificing his Skirk Prospector and eventually hitting the only non-1 CMC creature in his deck, Godo Bandit Warlord. Godo enters the battlefield and Bill searches up a Helm of the Host. He then uses one of his floating mana to cast his signature spell, Magnetic Theft, to equip the Helm to Godo. The fully equipped Godo then goes to combat, and while nobody has any interaction, so Godo makes infinite copies of himself with Helm of the Host, and Bill then wins the game. Now, if this is your first experience with Oathbreaker, this game may have left you as unsatisfied as a night with me, so what we're going to do is give you a game number 2, which has a little bit more going on with it. In game number 2, the decks remained the same, but Nate decided that he wanted to roll the highest number, and he went first. He starts off this game by playing a Windswept Heath, which he immediately cracks to shock in a Stomping Ground, going down to 17 life, and he uses this mana to cast a Burgeoning. With nothing left, he passes to Adam. Adam plays a Wooded Foothills, and Nate plays a Bloodstained Mire. Adam cracks his land for a forest, and he then taps that forest to cast an Elvish Reclaimer. With nothing left, he passes to Bill. Bill plays a Snow-Covered Mountain, and Nate plays a Carplusian Forest. Bill then casts one of the only 0 CMC mana rocks legal in this format, a Chrome Mox. When it enters, he imprints a Goblin Shurgen, and he then taps his mana to cast an Arcane Signet. With nothing left, he passes to Jordan. Jordan plays a forest, and Nate plays a Spire Garden, and Nate has somehow kept a 4-land opening hand that I don't entirely hate. Anyway, Jordan finishes his turn by casting a Elvish Mystic, and he then goes to pass the turn to Nate, and on Jordan's end step, Nate cracks his Bloodstained Mire for a forest, and wait a second. You can't tutor up a forest with a Bloodstained Mire. If only there were like 5 people in the room at the time who basically devote their life to Magic the Gathering who could have caught that at the time it was being played. Fortunately, this misplay doesn't really matter in the course of this game, but it does give you a little bit of insight into how stupid we really are. Anyway, Nate finishes Jordan's turn by casting a Noxious Revival, putting a Windswept Heath to the top of his library, and he then goes to his turn and casts his Oathbreaker, Wren and Six. He then for 1 mana casts his signature spell, Crop Rotation, sacrificing a forest to tutor up a Thespian Stage to the battlefield. He then for 2 mana casts a Sylvan Scrying, revealing a Dark Depth that he puts to his hand. He then plays the Dark Depths as his land for turn, and he then activates his commander's -1 ability to ping down Jordan's Elvish Mystic. With nothing left, he passes to Adam. Adam plays a Yavimaya Cradle of Growth as his land, and Nate, not wanting to feel left out, plays a Windswept Heath. Adam then goes to his end step, and Nate decides to crack his Windswept Heath to get a forest to the battlefield. Bill then goes to his turn, plays a Snow-Covered Mountain, and Nate is finally out of lands to play. Bill then for 1 mana casts a Pithing Needle. The funny thing with this is it can name Thespian Stage's non-mana ability, and when it enters the battlefield, well, that's exactly what Bill has it do. Bill then continues on to his turn, casting a Shivan Devastator, X equaling 2, and he then goes to combat and swings this horrifying Hasty Hydra at Wren and Six. The damage is dealt, and Bill, with nothing left, passes to Jordan. Jordan casts a Boreal Druid and then plays a Dryad Arbor as his land for turn, and with nothing left, passes to Nate. Nate goes to his turn and is understandably upset that he can't have a turn 3 Merit Lage, but what he does have is a creature that I have never actually seen played in the history of my lifetime. Nate starts his turn off by casting a Primeval Titan. That card is legal in this format. When Primetime enters the battlefield, he puts a Field of the Dead and a Lotus Field onto the battlefield. Now, there are a few triggers here. Since both of these lands enter at the same time and the Field of the Dead condition is satisfied, he gets 2 zombies, and then he sacrifices his Carplusian Forest and a regular forest to the Lotus Field. He then goes to pass the turn to Adam, and on Nate's end step, Adam activates his Elvish Reclaimer, sacrificing a forest to get a Gaia's Cradle to his battlefield. Adam then goes to his turn and casts a Birchlore Rangers, and follows that up by casting a Deathrite Shaman. With nothing left, he ships the turn to Bill. Bill plays a Crystal Vein and then casts his Oathbreaker, Lukka Coppercoat Outcast, and now if you're paying attention, you may just be thinking that, well, Bill's just going to win the game here, but I'm going to let you in on a little secret. There's one fatal flaw with playing a polymorph-based Godo list, and that's, well, Godo has to be in your library for it to work, and you have to not draw it, for turn. Now, I'm not saying that's what happened, but I am saying that Bill activates Lukka's +1 ability, revealing an Impulsive Pilferer, and he then passes the turn to Jordan. Jordan, as his land, plays a Strip Mine, and he then casts an Allosaurus Shepherd. Feeling like he's played a relatively fair game of Magic, comparatively, he decides to just pass the turn off to Nate. Nate starts his turn off by casting a Lotus Cobra, and he then goes to combat and swings his 6/6 Primetime and a 2/2 at Lukka, and then another 2/2 zombie at Adam. The damage is all dealt, And off of the primetime triggers, he puts a tapped Wasteland and a Strip Mine onto the battlefield. He gets 2 zombies from these entering, and the Lotus Cobra generates mana, but it immediately fizzles as he goes to his second main phase, where he recasts his Oathbreaker Wren and Six for 4 mana. He then activates Wren and Six's +1 ability to return a Bloodstained Mire to his hand, and he then plays that Bloodstained Mire as his land for turn, which gets him a new zombie and gets him a mana with Lotus Cobra, and he immediately cracks his Bloodstained Mire for a mountain, getting another zombie and another mana from Lotus Cobra, but with nothing left to do, he goes to his end step, the 2 mana fizzles, and Jordan activates his Strip Mine, sacrificing it, and following again the golden rule of if you can fuck over Adam, you kinda have to do it, and he gets rid of Adam's Guidance Cradle. Adam then goes to his turn and activates his Deathrite Shaman, exiling Nate's Bloodstained Mire to cast a Quirion Ranger. He then activates his Quirion Ranger, bouncing his Yavimaya to untap his Deathrite Shaman. He follows this up by casting his commander, Tyvar Jubilant Brawler. He then casts his signature spell, Glimpse of Nature, exiling another land from Nate's graveyard with his Deathrite Shaman. He then activates Tyvar's +1 ability to untap his Deathrite, and activates his Deathrite Shaman again, exiling another one of Nate's lands to cast Llanowar Elves, drawing a card from Glimpse of Nature, and he ends his turn by casting a Jespera Sentinel and a Sky Shroud Ranger, drawing on each of those. Unfortunately, he doesn't draw him anything to kind of continue this chain, so he just passes the turn on to Bill. Bill starts his turn off by casting a Desperate Ritual. He then uses this mana to help hard cast Godo Bandit Warlord. Unfortunately, this uses up all of his available mana, so when he tutors up Helm of the Host to the battlefield, he's not able to equip it. So with nothing left, he passes to Jordan. Jordan is not having a good day. He passes the turn off to Nate. Nate starts his turn by immediately going to combat, swinging 6 2/2s, a 2/1, and a 6/6 at Bill. Off the primetime attack, Nate puts a Blast Zone and a Yavimaya Cradle of Growth onto the battlefield tapped, and Bill decides to block the Lotus Cobra and take the remaining 18. In his second main phase, Nate uses his Wasteland to get rid of another one of Adam's lands, and then uses his Strip Mine to spread the love a little bit and get rid of one of Jordan's forests. Jordan floats a green mana in response, and Nate casts Life from the Loam, attempting to return Strip Mine, Wasteland, and a forest to his hand. In response to this, Jordan casts a Return to Nature, targeting the Strip Mine. This resolves, so the Strip Mine is exiled, and still before life can resolve, he casts a Noxious Revival using mana to return Wasteland to the top of Nate's library. This also resolves, so Nate just gets a forest to his hand. He then concludes his turn by casting a Horn of Greed, replaying that forest, and then activating Wren and Six's -1 ability to ping down Adam's Quirion Ranger. With nothing left, he passes to Adam. Adam starts his turn off by activating Deathrite Shaman, eating another one of Nate's lands, and he uses this to help cast a Karametra's Acolyte. Since Tyvar is on the battlefield, he can immediately tap this for mana, generating 8 mana, and he uses this to cast a Glimpse of Nature for 3 mana. He then casts a Wirewood Symbiote, and he then activates Wirewood Symbiote, returning Deathrite Shaman to his hand to untap Karametra's Acolyte. He then retaps Karametra for 8 more mana and recasts Glimpse of Nature again for 5 mana, and now he draws 2 cards every time he plays a creature. He then plays a Leaf Crown Visionary, drawing 2 cards, an Allosaur Shepherd, drawing 2 more, an Elvish Archdruid, drawing 2 more, and he then recasts Deathrite Shaman, activates his Elvish Archdruid for 10 mana, casts an Elvish Mystic, and he finally finds a card he can use, and he casts Finale of Devastation, X equaling 5. This resolves, and he tutors up an Ashaya Soul of the Wild to his battlefield. He then activates Tyvar's -2 ability to return Quirion Ranger to the battlefield, and now he's got a little bit of a loop on his hands. Adam can activate his Quirion Ranger to untap his Karametra's Acolyte, and since Quirion Ranger is a forest, due to Ashaya's ability, he can have it return itself. He can then tap Karametra's Acolyte for more mana, recast Quirion Ranger, etc., etc., generating infinite mana and also drawing his entire library due to the Glimpse of Natures. He can continue to do this until he finds a way to get Finale of Devastation back, casting all of his other creatures on his way, making sure not to deck out, and then he finishes off this game by casting Finale for X equals 1000, giving all of his creatures haste, and swinging out for the win.